Danny Jacobs fights Shane MOSLEY Jr. this Saturday, July 6th in Anaheim, California. The two men meet over 10 rounds. Now, Jacobs is 37 years old. He's 37 wins and 4 losses, with 30 of those wins coming by way of KO. Shane MOSLEY Jr. is 33 years old. He has 21 wins, 4 losses, with 12 wins by KO. Now, before I jump into the technical breakdown of both fighters and how they match up, I'm going to go over a little bit of their backstory, because I think in this particular matchup, it's significant in terms of the contrast between the paths each man took to get to this point. So Danny Jacobs had an extensive amateur career with well over 100 fights. He was 4 times the New York City Golden Gloves champion, which is no mean feat, because the Golden Gloves tournament used to run from January through April. So it's tough enough to win that tournament 1 time, let alone 4 times. Now, Danny fell just a little bit short of making the Olympic team and decided to turn pro, signed with Golden Boy, and then made his pro debut in 2007 on the undercard of none other than Floyd Mayweather versus Ricky Hatton. So talk about jumping right into the bright lights right off of Floyd Mayweather versus Ricky Hatton. So talk about jumping right into it under those bright lights. Now, Danny's career followed sort of a typical prospect building path. He wasn't fed absolute tomato cans. He did face some decent competition, which I think helped build his ring intelligence and just helped him develop as a pro fighter. Now, his story takes a dramatic turn in 2011 because it's discovered that Danny has a tumor the size of a baseball next to his spine, which was what was causing him to slowly start to lose strength in his legs, and eventually he wasn't able to walk at all. He had to resort to just crawling. So now he has the surgery to get the tumor removed, but it's then discovered that this was a malignant tumor, and Danny had a form of bone cancer. So he underwent the radiation treatments. He beat cancer, and literally he isn't truly the miracle man, because not only was he able to regain his ability to walk, but he made a return to the ring successfully and then won the WBA middleweight championship in 2014. Now, Danny defended that title 4 times against Sergio Mora twice and Peter Quillen. And then the next 2 sort of most significant points in his career were his losses. In 2017, he lost a unanimous decision to Gennady Golovkin. Now, that was the first time that Golovkin was forced to go the distance with anybody. And then Danny's other significant loss was in 2019 versus Canelo Alvarez. Again, a very tough fight, but a well-fought fight on Danny's part. At that point, he decided to move up to super middle. He had a couple fights versus Gabe Rosado and then none other than Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. Before he then lost to John Ryder in 2022, and Danny's been out of the ring since 2022. Now, the one other loss worth mentioning, the 4th loss on his resume, Jacobs lost back in 2010 to a fellow named Dmitry Pirog. Now, that loss was interesting in a sense, because literally just a few days before, Danny Jacobs lost his grandmother, and she was one of his caregivers as he was growing up as a child, and of course that did wind up having a big impact on him in the ring. So kind of give him a free pass a little bit on that 1 loss, but I think it's significant that his other 3 losses are versus names that are very well known in the boxing middle and super middleweight division. Now, by contrast, let's take a look at Shane MOSLEY Jr. Now, I was only able to find 4 amateur bouts on Shane Mosley Jr.'s record. That doesn't mean he didn't have more, but clearly he had far less amateur experience than Danny Jacobs, and so that means Shane has had to do the bulk of his learning as a pro in the ring. Now, he made his pro debut in 2014. Quite frankly, I don't really recognize most of the names on his resume, but the most significant sort of part of his resume was in 2018. He was selected to fight on the Contender Series. He fought 4 times. He made it all the way to the final, but then he did lose in the final. Now, the one opponent they have in common is Gabe Rosado. And interestingly enough, both Danny Jacobs and Shane Mosley Jr. eked out decisions versus Gabe Rosado. So there's a sharp contrast in terms of the depth of Danny Jacobs' resume versus Shane Mosley Jr.'s resume. But I will give Shane Mosley Jr. credit in terms of just being a junior. Now, on one hand, he's not going to be like the Floyd Jr. and surpass the father in terms of ring accomplishments, but he's also not going to be the Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. and just kind of completely make a mockery of the sport and the profession. So I feel like Shane Jr. is somewhere in that middle ground. Shane Mosley Jr.'s strengths in the ring are: 1, he has a very penetrating jab that he uses to set up combos. He's got decent footwork. Shane Mosley Jr. is exceptionally coordinated, and he can pull off very sort of showboaty type moves where he turns and spins, has his hands down. Not necessarily something you would classically teach a fighter to do, but he's that athletic and that coordinated that he can pull it off. Now, sometimes I feel like Shane Mosley Jr.'s natural athleticism almost is a negative, because this can take away from Shane Mosley Jr.'s ability to sit down on his punches if he's constantly moving around so adeptly. And that is perhaps a detriment, I think, because we can see that he doesn't really have a lot of KOs, so he's somewhat short in the power department. A second technical error that Shane Mosley Jr. makes is sometimes, to avoid a punch, he'll kind of quickly jump straight back, but he has his arms extended. So that is not a good defensive position to be in. And if a savvy fighter like Danny Jacobs can kind of time Shane Mosley Jr.'s reaction like that, he could easily just step in with a punch and land. Finally, this is more of a mental question for Shane Mosley Jr., is he's been criticized for falling short in terms of his performance. And what I think people mean by that is he doesn't necessarily step up the urgency and close the show, as we would say. So that's difficult to sort of evaluate from the outside as to why that's going on, but that's something that, if he wants to, Shane Mosley Jr. needs to address with those people closest to him, like his trainer, etc. Let's take a look at Danny Jacobs. So similarly, Danny also has a very strong jab that he uses right from the opening to start setting up his combinations and punches. But the key difference between Danny and Shane Mosley Jr. is Danny carries more power in his punches. Again, because he is sitting down on his punches, he's able to generate that power. Perhaps the best example of this is take a look at his first round knockout of Peter Quillen. Now, for sure, the biggest plus in Danny Jacobs' favor is the fact that he has so much more experience than Shane Mosley Jr. I expect that to come into play in the fight. Now, the huge question mark for Danny Jacobs is, 1, well, he had a 2-year layoff. Now, he explains that by saying, he took that time to kind of deal with his mental health and probably do a little soul searching. So the plus side of that is I expect that he's now fully committed to being back in the ring, and that there are no questions in his mind that he wants to indeed be there on Saturday, July the 6th, across the ring from Shane Mosley Jr. The one other question is, well, Danny Jacobs has 7 more years of ring time than Shane Mosley. Has that taken a toll on his body physically? We won't really know that until he steps in the ring with Shane Mosley Jr. Now, how does this matchup between Danny Jacobs and Shane Mosley Jr. play out? Well, in this case, I actually think the person in command is going to be Andre Rozier, Danny Jacobs' trainer. And the reason for that is I think that he's basically going to determine what he sees, not only from Danny, but also from Shane, and then direct Danny in a certain way. So, for example, if he sees that Danny can take Shane Mosley out because he knows he's got the power shot, he knows he's got counter shots against Shane, then he's going to call for Danny, just take him out. Let's get rid of this guy. If, on the other hand, he feels like Danny needs a little bit more time to kind of get in his groove or what have you, then he is going to just probably encourage him to just stick with his jab and keep moving around Shane Mosley. One thing I forgot to mention that could play into Danny's favor is he can switch to lefty, which he did do. You saw in some of his fights with, I think, both Gennady and Canelo. But the way Danny does it, he does it very smoothly. He doesn't just stay in one spot and switch his feet underneath him like Yuri Prohaska. Instead, Danny switches stance as he's moving, so he steps naturally into southpaw if he's going to do that. But okay, so back to Andre Rozier. If he feels like Daniel, if he wants Daniel to get, as we say, more work in, he's going to call for that. Just have Danny, work off certain techniques. I mean, finally, worst case scenario, if he sees his fighters in there and he's just, as we say, a former shell of himself, and he just doesn't have it anymore, I think Andre will read him the riot act and say, hey, look, you got to do X, Y, and Z, or I'm giving you one more round, and then I'm going to call the fight off. And for sure, if Danny doesn't perform up to Andre's standard, he will indeed wave the fight off. I mean, these guys have been together since day one. Andre knows his fighter inside and out. Andre's an old school New York style boxing trainer. He's not going to mince words. And he's certainly not going to allow his fighter to go in there just to go out on his shield. There's absolutely no point in that for Danny Jacobs at this point in his life and at this point in his career. So let's see how this fight plays out. I actually do believe that Danny could get either a stoppage or the unanimous decision versus Shane Mosley Jr. based on primarily the fact that he has so much more extensive experience in the ring. But let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Once again, if you enjoyed this breakdown, please feel free to head over to buymeacoffee.com, or you can leave a super thanks if you scroll over to the right underneath this video. And finally, if you enjoy the comments and the discussion here, please consider joining us as a member in our members only area. Thank you, and I look forward to reading your comments.